Did you ever wonder what it takes to change the fate of an entire nation? What if for 20 years your home was ruled by fear and no one dared to stand up? Now imagine the hero that steps forward isn't a king or a mighty warrior. It's a woman, a prophet, a judge, a leader who listens when everyone else is silent. In the darkest days of Israel, with iron chariots thundering across the land and families hiding in their homes, hope seemed lost. People were afraid to travel the roads. Mothers held their children close. Fathers whispered prayers for deliverance. But beneath the shade of a palm tree, one woman was listening to something greater than fear. She heard the cries of her people and the voice of God. Her name was Deborah. Her story isn't just a chapter in an old book. It's a story of courage that crosses centuries. It's about breaking expectations. It's about faith that stands tall when everything seems impossible. And it's about what happens when you trust that one voice, even your own, can start a revolution of hope. Are you ready to discover how Deborah, in a world where women were rarely seen or heard, became the leader who saved a nation? Stay with me, because this is more than a legend. It's an invitation. It's a reminder that sometimes the answer the world needs comes from the most unexpected place. Let's begin this journey together, right now. What does it feel like when your world is falling apart? Imagine waking up every morning to the sound of fear. Picture empty roads where children once played and markets once buzzed with life. Israel was drowning in silence. For 20 years, the land had known nothing but the iron grip of an enemy king. King Jabin of Canaan ruled with cruelty. His general Sisera commanded 900 iron chariots, the deadliest weapons anyone had ever seen. Those chariots thundered across the fields, crushing hope and dreams beneath their wheels. Fathers whispered, "Stay inside." Mothers held their children close, eyes darting to the horizon. At night, the only sound was the wind. No singing, no laughter, just the quiet ache of waiting for something to change. Farmers watched their crops die in the fields, knowing at any moment Sisera's men could steal what little was left. Homes grew emptier, dreams grew smaller. Families, once full of joy, were now shadows, holding on by a thread. Israel's darkest hour wasn't just about war, it was about the slow, grinding loss of hope. It was the pain of watching your future disappear, day by day, year by year. No one dared travel the roads. Trade stopped, villages shrank. People prayed for deliverance, but every sunrise felt the same as the last. Fear wasn't just a feeling, it was the air they breathed. Maybe you've never lived through an invasion, but history is full of moments like this, times when whole communities felt trapped, powerless, and forgotten. Think of families living in hiding during the Holocaust, afraid to speak above a whisper, not knowing if rescue would ever come. Or picture America's South during the darkest years of segregation, entire neighborhoods living with the daily weight of injustice and the ache for change. You can feel the fear, the waiting, the desperate hope for something, anything to break the cycle. That's where Israel was. Oppression has a way of shrinking a person's world. You stop planning for the future. You focus only on surviving today. You tell your children stories of better times, but your eyes can't hide the truth. When the pain is this deep, even prayer feels risky. What if hope makes things worse? What if God doesn't answer? But in every dark age, something stirs beneath the surface. A whisper, a restlessness, a stubborn belief that life can be better. When every door slams shut, the human spirit starts to look for cracks of light. It's in those cracks, those tiny places where faith and desperation meet, that the seeds of freedom begin to grow. There's a reason history is filled with stories of deliverance after the darkest nights, because it's in the waiting, in the silent prayers, that courage starts to build. In Israel, those silent prayers began to gather. They rose from lonely huts and empty streets, from parents holding children tight, from elders who remembered the days of Moses and miracles. They cried out, not because they knew what would happen, but because they had nowhere else to turn. That's what oppression does. It breaks you down, but sometimes it also wakes you up. It teaches you that survival isn't enough. You start to hunger for freedom. You start to believe that somewhere, somehow, deliverance is possible. And if you look back at history, at every moment when people refused to give up, even when every sign said it was over, you'll see the same thing. A spark, a prayer, a refusal to let the darkness win. That's where Israel was, on the edge, waiting, yearning. And just when it seemed that hope was lost forever, history took a turn. Because sometimes the answer to the longest night isn't a hero with a sword. Sometimes it's a whisper beneath a palm tree. Sometimes it's a leader no one expects. And sometimes it's faith itself that begins the rescue. But that's just the beginning of the story. Let's meet the most unexpected leader Israel ever had and see how her courage would change everything. What happens when the answer to a nation's prayer comes from the last place anyone expects? Let's step back into that world, ancient Israel, a time when men led armies, men settled disputes, men decided the future. But there, beneath the shade of a palm tree, sat a woman. Her name was Deborah. In a society where women rarely held power, Deborah's presence was extraordinary. She wasn't just any woman, she was a prophet, a woman who listened for the voice of God. She was a judge, the wisest in the land. People walked for miles through dust and danger just to sit at her feet and ask for guidance. Picture the scene: men with weathered faces, women clutching their children, warriors, farmers, elders, all waiting for Deborah's judgment. She listened. She weighed every word. Her decisions brought peace, justice, and hope. But Deborah was more than wise. She was brave. She saw pain all around her, families torn apart, fear in every corner, and she refused to look away. She understood that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice. It's about being the truest. Imagine the courage it took to step forward in a world where so many expected her to stay silent. This wasn't just unusual, it was unheard of. And yet, history is full of moments when women stood where no one expected. Think about Joan of Arc, a young woman who heard a calling, led armies, and turned the tide of a war. Or Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery, she risked her life again and again to lead others to freedom. Both were women who changed history because they listened to a higher purpose, to the cries of their people. Deborah was that kind of leader. She didn't rule from a throne or command an army with a sword. She led with wisdom, with faith, with an unshakable belief that God had not forgotten her people. And when she spoke, people listened, not just because of her words, but because of the courage behind them. Look around today, and you'll see the echoes of Deborah's story. Think of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the first women on the U.S. Supreme Court. She faced walls and ceilings everywhere she went, but she kept pushing, kept deciding, kept making space for others to dream bigger. Or Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the first female president in Africa. She took office in a country shattered by war, and with steady courage, helped heal a nation. These women, and so many more, prove a powerful truth. Leadership isn't about fitting a mold. It's about standing up when it matters. It's about listening, deciding, and daring to act, even when the world says you can't. I think of Deborah sitting beneath that palm tree. No army at her side, no royal robe on her shoulders, just the quiet strength of someone who knows who she is and why she's there. That kind of leadership changes everything. Because when someone finds the courage to lead from the heart, it gives others permission to do the same. Maybe that's the real miracle in Deborah's story, not just the battles won or the years of peace that followed, but the fact that one woman in a time of chaos chose to listen, to believe, and to lead. And in doing so, she rewrote what was possible for a whole nation. But her journey wasn't just about judgment and wisdom. Soon, her courage would be tested in ways even she could never have imagined. So what happens when faith demands more than words? When it calls for action? Let's follow Deborah as she steps into the storm and discover how her unique calling became the hope of an entire people. Why do we keep making the same mistakes over and over again? That's a question as old as history, and it's right at the heart of Israel's story. For generations, the people of Israel had been caught in a painful cycle. First, things would go well. There was peace, prosperity, and hope. But then comfort would turn to complacency. Slowly, quietly, they would drift away from the values and faith that once held them together. They forgot the God who brought them out of Egypt. They chased after new idols, promises of happiness, power, or security that never really delivered. It always seemed harmless at first, a little compromise, a small step off the path. But soon, those choices piled up, and before they knew it, Israel was in trouble again. When the trouble came, it hit hard. Enemies rose up. Oppressors tightened their grip. The people suffered, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. And in the darkness, they remembered what they'd lost. Despair set in. Families whispered about the old days when things were better. People wondered if rescue would ever come. Finally, with nowhere else to turn, they cried out for help. They prayed. They admitted their mistakes. They begged for mercy. And time after time, God listened. He raised up a deliverer, a judge, a leader, a hope for a new beginning. The cycle would start over, faith restored, freedom regained, hope renewed. But after a while, old patterns returned, and so the cycle spun on. Disobedience, despair, repentance, rescue. It wasn't just Israel. We all know what it feels like to be stuck in a loop we can't seem to break. Think about it. Maybe it's a bad habit you can't shake, promising yourself each time that this is the last time. Maybe it's a relationship that goes from hope to hurt over and over. Or maybe it's something bigger, like a community facing addiction, violence, or poverty. Consider recovery programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. The stories you hear are stories of people who hit rock bottom. They lost jobs, families, even hope itself. But in the middle of their darkest night, they cried out for help. They found support. They rebuilt their lives, one day at a time. Yet even then, the struggle is never really over. It takes daily effort to break free from old cycles and start again. Or think about cities that rise from tragedy, communities devastated by storms or violence who rebuild only to face new challenges again. But here's the truth. Recognizing the cycle is the first step toward breaking it. When Israel finally admitted, "We have sinned, we have turned from you, but please don't abandon us," that was the turning point. It wasn't the end of their troubles, but it was the beginning of freedom. In my own life, I've seen how hard it can be to break out of old habits, but I've also seen the hope that comes from finally saying, enough, from reaching out for help, from believing that change is possible, no matter how many times you've fallen before. Maybe that's why this part of Deborah's story speaks so powerfully. It isn't just about battles and victories. It's about the courage to admit you're lost, to cry out to anyone, to God, to a friend, and trust that a new story can begin. Here's the lesson I hold on to. We're not defined by our failures. We're defined by the choices we make next. You can choose to stay stuck, or you can choose to break the cycle. Freedom begins with honesty, with facing the truth and asking for help. And that's exactly what Israel did. They reached the end of themselves. They called out, and help was already on the way. But it wouldn't look the way anyone expected, because sometimes the answer to a nation's cry isn't found in the past, but in someone willing to step forward into the unknown. Let's see what happens when faith, courage, and the unexpected collide, setting the stage for a battle that would change everything. But what happens when it's time to act, and you're not sure you can? That's the question that faced Barak. Deborah had heard God's call. She'd sent for Barak and delivered the message straight from heaven. Take 10,000 men. Go to Mount Tabor. The Lord will hand Sisera into your hands. Barak wanted to believe. He wanted to be brave, but fear held him back. He'd seen the iron chariots. He'd heard the stories of Sisera's army. Unbeatable, ruthless, impossible to defeat. You can almost hear the hesitation in his voice. If you go with me, I'll go. But if you don't go, I won't. It's such a human response, isn't it? We want a guarantee. We want someone to hold our hand. We want to know that success is certain before we take the first step. Barak's fear wasn't weakness. It was real. It was honest. He didn't doubt Deborah's wisdom, he just doubted himself. He'd never led men into a battle like this. He'd never faced odds so overwhelming. And when the pressure's on, even the strongest of us sometimes freeze. It reminds me of American soldiers in World War II. Brave, determined, but on the beaches of Normandy, many felt paralyzed by fear. They stepped forward anyway, but not because they were sure of victory. They stepped forward because someone believed in them. Because sometimes courage is simply taking the next step, even when your knees are shaking. Or think about young people today, facing big changes, new careers, starting over. The fear of failing, of disappointing others, of not being enough. It's powerful. It stops dreams before they even begin. Barak looked at Deborah and saw strength. He saw faith that didn't waver. She didn't have an army. She didn't carry a sword. But she had something Barak needed, unshakable trust in the promise of God. Deborah didn't mock Barak's fear. She acknowledged it, but she also reminded him where real victory comes from. "Certainly I will go with you," she said, "but the honor will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Her words weren't meant to shame Barak. They were meant to set him free from the need to be the hero, from the burden of carrying it all alone. But they were also a reminder. Don't put your faith in people. Don't anchor your hope in human strength. Anchor it in something bigger, in something eternal. That's the trap so many of us fall into. We look for someone else to carry us through. We put our faith in leaders, in institutions, even in ourselves. But people are fallible. They hesitate. They get tired. They let us down. Deborah's faith was different. She trusted in a purpose bigger than herself. She trusted in a God who had already promised deliverance, even when the odds looked impossible. Here's the lesson. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward in spite of it. It's choosing faith over doubt, hope over despair. It's trusting that you don't have to have all the answers before you act. Barak stepped forward, not because he stopped being afraid, but because Deborah's faith lit a path through his fear. I think about the times I've been scared to step out. Maybe you do too. Maybe you're standing on the edge of something right now, unsure if you can make it, wondering if it's worth the risk. Let Deborah's courage and Barak's honesty be your reminder. It's okay to be afraid. Just don't let fear decide your future. Take the next step. And as we'll see, when courage and faith come together, history changes. Now let's see what happens when a trembling army faces the impossible and the sky itself joins the fight. What happens when you step forward, trusting in something you can't see? Let's stand on the edge of Mount Tabor where hope and fear collide. Barak, Deborah, and 10,000 warriors look out at the valley below. Against them, Sisera's army, 900 iron chariots glinting in the sun. The odds are impossible. You can feel the tension in the air. Deborah's voice breaks the silence. Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Barak's heart pounds. His men grip their swords tighter. But then, nature itself begins to change. Clouds gather on the horizon. The air grows heavy, thick with anticipation. Then, thunder. Lightning cracks the sky. And suddenly rain pours down in sheets. Not just a drizzle, a torrent. The ground turns to mud. The mighty Kishon River, usually calm, begins to swell and rage. Sisera's iron chariots, their greatest weapon, become their downfall. Wheels sink deep into the mud. Horses panic and thrash. Soldiers slip and stumble. Confusion spreading like wildfire. The impossible happens. Barak and his men charge. They surge down the mountainside, hearts racing, faith leading every step. Sisera's army, once unstoppable, is thrown into chaos. The chariots that once ruled the land are trapped and useless. Victory, once unthinkable, becomes real right before their eyes. You can almost hear the shouts, see the relief and disbelief in every face. It wasn't strength or numbers that won the day. It was faith and an unexpected miracle, the storm that changed everything. This isn't just a story from the past. Miracles, moments when everything changes in an instant, still happen. Think about Hurricane Katrina. People trapped, desperate, with nowhere to turn. But time and again, help arrived in the most unexpected ways. A neighbor's boat rescuing strangers. A helicopter pilot risking everything to save one more life. Sometimes it was a break in the clouds, a sudden patch of dry ground, giving people just enough hope to keep going. Or remember September 11th. Amid the horror and heartbreak, stories of the survivor staircase or a first responder's gut feeling to turn left instead of right lives saved in ways that defied logic. We call them miracles. Maybe you have a story like that when a job appeared just as you thought you'd lose everything. when a stranger's kindness pulled you back from the edge, when you stepped forward in faith and help came from a place you never imagined. The battle at Mount Tabor reminds us, when we act with courage, even when we're afraid, when we move forward with faith, even when the odds are against us, sometimes the world itself seems to shift. Help arrives from the most unexpected places. The lesson? You don't have to see the whole plan. You don't have to know how it will all work out. You just have to take the first step. And sometimes, that's all it takes for a miracle to begin. But the story doesn't end with victory on the battlefield, because sometimes the most unlikely hero is still waiting just off stage. Let's see what happens when destiny knocks at the door of an ordinary woman and history is changed forever. What if the hero of the story isn't the one you expect? After the thunder of battle and the chaos of chariots trapped in mud, the mighty commander Sisera ran for his life. No armor, no army, no glory, just fear. He stumbled through fields and hills until he found the tent of Jael. To Sisera, Jael was no threat, just a woman, just an outsider, just someone on the sidelines of history. But sometimes the sidelines are where real heroes are found. Jael welcomed Sisera into her tent. She gave him milk, calmed his nerves, covered him with a blanket. To Sisera, she was a safe haven, a moment of comfort after a day of terror. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. Jael saw the bigger story. She saw the suffering Sisera had brought to her people. She saw a chance, not for violence, but for justice. In a single shocking moment, Jael did what no soldier, no general, no king had managed to do. She ended Sisera's reign of fear. The most powerful man on the battlefield was brought down, not by an army, not by a famous warrior, but by a woman history almost overlooked. It's a moment that still stirs debate. Was it courage? Was it desperation? Maybe it was both. But one thing is clear. Jael changed the course of a nation. Her actions fulfilled Deborah's prophecy. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. Sometimes history turns on the choices of those we least expect. Think about the untold heroes of our own time, the nurses and doctors who worked tirelessly through the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many were never named, never interviewed on TV, but their courage saved countless lives. Or the strangers who risked their own safety during hurricanes, floods, or fires, stepping into danger to save neighbors, friends, or even strangers. You might not remember their names, but without them, the story would end very differently. Here's the mistake we make over and over. We underestimate the power of those who seem ordinary. We look for heroes in shining armor. We forget that history is full of quiet strength, of people who step up in the moment that matters most. Jael wasn't looking for glory. She didn't have a title, but she had courage. She saw what needed to be done, and she acted. That's the power of the unexpected, and it's a reminder to every one of us. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to have an army. You just have to be ready to act when your moment comes. Never underestimate your own potential to change the story. Never overlook the people on the margins. Their strength might be the secret force that turns the tide. As the dust settled and the sun rose on a new day, Israel's victory was secure, not just because of armies and leaders, but because of a woman whose name might have been forgotten, if not for one bold choice. But victory is only the beginning. Now let's see how peace and a new legacy can grow from the courage of unexpected heroes. What happens after the battle ends? Sometimes the real legacy begins only after the dust has settled. Deborah didn't just help win a war, she helped plant the seeds for a different future. With Sisera gone and Canaanite oppression broken, Israel entered a time of peace. Not just a pause in fighting, but a true era of rebuilding. For 40 years, the land rested, families breathed easier, children played in the streets again. The roads, once empty and silent, filled with laughter and life. But Deborah's legacy went far beyond quiet days and peaceful nights. She gave her people something even more powerful than victory. She gave them hope. She reminded them that faith, when lived with courage, can defeat any enemy, outside or within. And she showed an entire nation that leadership isn't defined by gender, title, or tradition. It's defined by wisdom, by integrity, by the willingness to answer a call, no matter who you are. Deborah's story inspired more than just her own generation. It echoed through time, giving courage to women and men who felt overlooked or underestimated. Think about our world today. We've seen incredible women step into roles once considered impossible. In America, women now lead in politics, business, and every field imaginable. Think of Vice President Kamala Harris, breaking barriers for women and people of color, or Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, steering one of the world's biggest companies through change. Or look to the women who quietly transform communities, teachers, doctors, activists, each one changing lives in ways that history books might never capture. Every time a girl stands up in a classroom and says, "I want to be president," every time a woman leads her team, her family, her neighborhood, that's Deborah's legacy in action. But this change didn't come easy. It took courage. Courage to dream, to speak up, to keep going when others said no. Deborah's story teaches us that legacy isn't just about power or fame. True legacy is about inspiring others. It's about planting seeds of hope and watching them grow. It's about leaving behind a world a little brighter, a little stronger, because you dared to lead. Here's what moves me most. Deborah never set out to be a legend. She listened, she cared, she acted when the moment called. That's the kind of leadership that lasts. It's not about being remembered for what you won, but for what you built. Peace, trust, a path for others to follow. So when you think about Deborah, don't just picture the victory. Picture the generations that followed. Children growing up without fear, women dreaming bigger, leaders rising with wisdom and faith. That's the true power of her story. That's what it means to leave a legacy. And maybe, just maybe, that's a call for each of us to lead with courage, to inspire hope, to plant seeds of change for tomorrow. As we reach the end of Deborah's story, there's one final lesson, a challenge for each of us, right where we are. Are you ready to see what it takes to rise when the world needs you most? Let's step into that challenge together. So what do we take from Deborah's story? After all these centuries, at the heart of it, there's one lesson that never grows old. Have the courage to rise when you're called. Dare to believe in something bigger than yourself. In a world that often celebrates power and noise, Deborah teaches us the power of quiet strength. She listened, she led, she trusted that her moment, her voice, could make a difference. That same call echoes for each of us, in our own time, in our own way. Sometimes it's loud and unmistakable. More often, it's a whisper, a tug at your heart, a chance to do the right thing, a moment that asks for your courage. And it's not just for prophets, presidents, or public figures. It's for every one of us. Think about the single mom working 2 jobs who starts her own business, not just for herself, but to show her children what's possible. She faces setbacks and sleepless nights, but she keeps going. Her faith, her courage, becomes the foundation for her family's future. Or picture a student, a young black woman, the first in her family to go to college, who walks across the stage at Harvard. She carries generations of hope on her shoulders. She studies late, works harder, fights for every opportunity. She proves that even when the world says no, faith and persistence can rewrite the story. Or imagine a community flattened by a hurricane. Homes destroyed, dreams scattered, but neighbors come together, rolling up their sleeves, cleaning, rebuilding, believing that tomorrow will be better. It's in those moments, when hope seems distant, when the way forward is unclear, that faith and action matter most. Deborah's story isn't just ancient history, it's a living invitation, a reminder that the world still needs people willing to say yes to their calling, no matter how small or ordinary it seems. Because every act of courage, every choice to stand up, speak up, help someone try again, plant seeds that can change the world. Here's the challenge I carry, and I invite you to carry too. Don't wait for perfect circumstances. Don't wait to feel fearless. Just listen for the call, whatever it sounds like in your life. Have faith that your story matters, that your step forward could be the very thing someone else needs to see. Because legacy isn't measured by headlines or history books. It's built one decision at a time, one act of kindness, one moment of courage, one leap of faith. So I ask you, right now, what is your calling? What's the step you've been waiting to take? How will you answer when your moment comes? Maybe today is your day to say yes. And as you do, remember, you are part of a much bigger story. A story of hope, courage, and faith still being written every single day. Let's carry that legacy forward together. Let's take a moment to remember what this story has shown us. We saw that even in the darkest times, courage and faith can change everything. We learned that leadership isn't about titles. It's about listening, acting, and believing in a purpose greater than yourself. We saw how one woman's obedience, Deborah's willingness to rise and trust, brought hope and freedom to an entire nation. And we were reminded that the power to inspire and lead isn't reserved for heroes in history books. It's in all of us. So how can you use this story in your own life? Maybe it means standing up for someone who needs a friend. Maybe it's having the faith to start again, even after failure. Or maybe it's simply choosing kindness every single day. Ask yourself, what step can I take today to answer my own calling? How can I bring hope, courage, or light to someone else? Because you don't have to be a warrior. You don't have to be a prophet, but you can choose to be faithful and willing, just like Deborah. And that, more than anything, can change a whole generation. If this story spoke to you, I want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Like this video and pass it along to someone who might need a little hope today. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another story of courage and faith. Thanks for joining me on this journey. Now go out and write your own chapter. You are part of this legacy too.